There was a woman crying in the back row of my father's funeral. I'd never seen her before in my life. She was maybe 50, dressed in black, clutching a tissue to her face. Next to her sat two people around my age, a man and a woman, holding her hands, their heads bowed. They looked devastated. They looked like family. But they weren't my family. I know every relative I have, every cousin, every aunt, every distant connection who sends Christmas cards with photos I've never met. We're a small family, my mom, my dad, me, and a smattering of extended relations scattered across the Midwest. I could fit everyone who loved my father into one room. And yet, here was this woman, sobbing like her world had ended, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. Have you ever noticed something wrong at exactly the worst possible moment? When you're already drowning in grief and your brain latches onto a detail that doesn't fit, and suddenly you can't let it go? If you've been there, you know what I mean. Let me know in the comments, because I still remember that feeling like it was yesterday. I tried to focus on the service, on the minister's words about eternal rest and God's grace, and all the things you're supposed to say when a 58-year-old man drops dead of a heart attack in his office on a random Tuesday. My father, Michael Chen, accountant, husband, father, Little League coach, the most boring, reliable, predictable man I'd ever known. Dead at 58 because his heart just stopped. No warning, no goodbyes. One minute he was reviewing quarterly reports, and the next, he was gone. My mother sat beside me, rigid as stone. She hadn't cried yet, not in front of me anyway. She was holding it together with the kind of fierce determination that scared me a little. Like if she let herself feel anything, she'd shatter completely. I held her hand, listened to the minister, tried not to stare at the woman in the back row, but I couldn't help it. Something was wrong. Something about the way she cried. Deep, guttural sobs that she was trying and failing to muffle. This wasn't the polite grief of a colleague or distant acquaintance. This was the grief of someone who had lost everything. After the service, I watched her. She didn't approach my mother or me to offer condolences. She didn't sign the guest book. She just left, quickly, like she was afraid of being seen. The two young people went with her. The man had his arm around her shoulders. The woman was wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. And just before they reached the door, the man turned back. Our eyes met. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Curiosity? Sadness? Recognition? Then he was gone. I should have followed them, should have demanded answers right then and there. But my mother needed me, and there were 100 relatives waiting to share memories and hug me and tell me my father was in a better place. So I let them go. That was my first mistake. 3 weeks after the funeral, I started cleaning out my father's home office. My mother couldn't do it. Every time she tried, she'd make it 10 minutes before dissolving into tears. So I took over, driving to my parents' house every weekend, sorting through decades of accumulated paperwork and files and the detritus of a life lived largely behind a desk. My father was organized, obsessively so. Everything had its place. Tax returns filed by year, insurance documents in labeled folders, receipts kept in envelopes marked with dates and categories. It made the task easier, mechanical. I could sort without thinking, which was exactly what I needed, until I found the box. It was in the back of his closet, behind a stack of old computer equipment. A simple cardboard box, the kind you'd get from a moving company. No label, no markings, just brown cardboard and packing tape. I almost didn't open it. Almost. Inside, I found photographs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Photos of a life I didn't recognize. The woman from the funeral. Younger, smiling, standing next to my father on what looked like a beach vacation. Another photo. My father holding a baby, beaming at the camera with an expression of pure joy. Another, a little girl on his shoulders, both of them laughing. My hands started shaking. I kept digging. Birthday cards. Happy 40th to the best dad ever, written in a child's handwriting. Letters. I miss you so much. When are you coming back? Mom says you have to work, but I wish you could be here for my recital. A child's drawing. A stick figure family. A woman, a man, 2 children. My family, written across the top in crayon. I sat on my father's closet floor, surrounded by evidence of a life he'd hidden from us. A second family, a wife, or at least a partner, and 2 children. The math started running in my head, automatic and horrifying. The business trips that took him away 3 or 4 times a month. The conference calls he had to take in private. The way he always seemed distracted, like part of him was somewhere else. Part of him was somewhere else. Part of him was with them. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Time had stopped making sense. Eventually, I heard my mother's voice from downstairs. Maya, everything okay up there? No, nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. Fine, Mom. Just found some old photos. Give me a minute. I looked at the box, at the photographs, at 30 years of lies. I could put it back, close the closet, never mention it to anyone. My mother was already destroyed by grief. Did she need this too? Did she need to know that the man she'd loved for 35 years had been living a double life? I thought about it, really thought about it. Then I took the box to my car. I didn't tell my mother. I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I knew the full truth. For 2 weeks, I became obsessed. Every spare moment went into researching, digging, trying to piece together the secret life my father had hidden from us. The photographs had locations in the metadata, Portland, Oregon, over and over again. My father had told us his business trips were mostly to Chicago, New York, sometimes LA. He'd never mentioned Portland, but according to these photos, he'd been going there for decades. I found a return address on one of the old letters. A house in a suburb called Lake Oswego. I searched the property records. The house was owned by someone named Patricia Okonkwo. I searched her name, found a LinkedIn profile. She was a nurse at a hospital in Portland, mid-50s. The profile picture matched the woman from the funeral. My stomach turned. More searching. Public records. Social media. The kind of deep dive you do when you're desperate for answers and don't care about privacy anymore. Patricia had 2 children, a son named Daniel, 28, a daughter named Iris, 26. I found Daniel's Instagram, scrolled through his photos with shaking hands. There he was, the man from the funeral, the one who'd looked at me before leaving. And there, in photo after photo, was my father. My father at Daniel's college graduation. My father at what looked like a birthday dinner. My father holding a baby, Daniel's baby, based on the caption. 3 generations, Grandpa's first time meeting little Marcus. Grandpa. My father was a grandfather to a child I didn't know existed. I slammed my laptop shut, walked to my kitchen, poured a glass of wine, then another, then finished the bottle. My father had been there for graduations and birthdays and the birth of his grandchild. He'd been present in their lives in a way that suddenly made me question how present he'd really been in mine. All those business trips, all those "I'll be back on Sunday" weekends, all those missed dinners and school plays, and moments he'd apologized for because work comes first sometimes, Maya. That's just how it is. Work hadn't come first. They had come first. The next morning, hungover and hollow, I made a decision. I was going to Portland. I told my mother I was visiting a friend. She didn't question it. She was too deep in her own grief to notice much of anything. The flight from Chicago to Portland was 3.5 hours. I spent every minute of it rehearsing what I'd say. Hi, I'm Maya. I think my father was also your father. Hi, I'm your half-sister. Nice to meet you. Hi, I'm the daughter from the family my father actually lived with. You know, his real family. Nothing sounded right. I'd found Daniel's workplace through his LinkedIn, a marketing agency in downtown Portland. I had no plan beyond showing up and hoping he'd talk to me. The building was sleek and modern, all glass and exposed brick. I sat in the lobby for 20 minutes, pretending to read emails on my phone, waiting. He walked through the door at 12:15, probably heading to lunch. Same face I'd seen at the funeral, same dark eyes that had met mine before he disappeared. Daniel? He froze. I'm Maya, Maya Chen. I think we need to talk. For a long moment, he just stared at me. I watched emotions cycle across his face, surprise, then recognition, then something that looked almost like relief. I was wondering when you'd find us, he said. We went to a coffee shop around the corner, sat across from each other like strangers on a first date, except the stakes were infinitely higher. You knew about us, I said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, we knew. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. Dad told us when I was 15, said he had another family in Chicago, a wife and a daughter. He told you? He wanted us to understand why he couldn't be around more, why he had to leave every few weeks. Daniel's jaw tightened. He made it sound noble somehow, like he was sacrificing so much to take care of both families, like we should be grateful for the time we got. Were you grateful? I was 15. I was angry. I didn't talk to him for almost a year. He looked at me, really looked. But eventually, I don't know, he was still my dad, and having him part-time felt better than not having him at all. I felt something crack in my chest. He never told us, my mom and I. We had no idea. Daniel's expression shifted, softened. I wondered about that at the funeral, the way you kept looking at my mom, like you didn't know who she was. He shook his head. I can't imagine finding out like this after he's already gone. Yeah, well, I blinked hard, refusing to cry. Surprise. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about growing up with a part-time father, about the stories Dad had invented to explain his absences, traveling salesman, later upgraded to consultant with clients across the country, about the way his mother had accepted the arrangement because she loved him and didn't want to be alone. She knew about your mom too, Daniel said. From the beginning, Dad was already married when they met. He told her eventually, and she stayed anyway. How? Why? I've asked her that 100 times. She always says the same thing. He gave me you and Iris. That's enough. He smiled sadly. I don't know if it was enough, but it's what she chose. I thought about my mother, about the years she'd spent waiting for my father to come home from business trips, about the dinners kept warm and the phone calls that went to voicemail and the quiet disappointment she'd learned to hide. She didn't choose this, I said. My mom, she didn't know. I know. Daniel reached across the table. I'm sorry, Maya. I'm sorry you found out this way. And I'm sorry we never reached out. Dad made us promise, said it would destroy everyone if the families ever met. Looks like he was right. Daniel took me to meet his mother. I didn't want to go. Every cell in my body was screaming to get on a plane and fly home and pretend none of this was happening. But I'd come this far. I needed to see it through. Patricia's house was exactly what I'd expected from the photos. Cozy, warm, full of evidence of a life lived fully. Family photos on every wall, my father's face in half of them. She was waiting in the living room, smaller than she'd seemed at the funeral, older, tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Maya, she said my name like she'd been practicing it. I've thought about you so many times. You knew about me? Since before you were born. She gestured to the couch. Please, sit. I want to ask you something, and I need your honest answer. What would you have done in this moment? Would you have stayed to hear her out, or would you have walked away? Because I still don't know if what I did was right. Drop stay or leave in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. I sat, Patricia told me her story, how she'd met my father at a conference when he was 28 and already married 3 years, how they'd fallen in love despite knowing it was wrong, how she'd gotten pregnant with Daniel and faced a choice: raise a child alone or accept a part-time partner who would never fully be hers. I chose him, she said simply. Half of Michael was better than none of Michael. That was the calculation I made. But he was my mother's husband. I know. She didn't flinch from it. I'm not proud of what we did, but I can't regret it either, not when it gave me my children. Did you ever think about us, about what it was doing to my family? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Every day, she finally said, every time he left, I thought about the woman waiting for him on the other end, the daughter he was going home to. I told myself it was okay, because you didn't know, because you weren't being hurt by something you were unaware of. We were hurt every time he missed a school play or came home distracted or spent a holiday working late. We were hurt. We just didn't know why. I understand that now. Her eyes were wet. I understood it then, too. I just chose not to think about it. I wanted to hate her. Part of me did hate her. This woman who had knowingly shared my father, who had raised her children in the shadow of my family, who had attended his funeral like she had as much right to grieve as we did. But another part of me saw something else. A woman who had spent 30 years in love with a man who could never fully commit to her, who had raised 2 children alone most of the time, who had accepted crumbs and convinced herself it was a feast. My mother had been deceived, but Patricia had been complicit in her own heartbreak. I wasn't sure which was worse. Daniel's sister arrived an hour later. Iris was angrier than her brother. It radiated off her the moment she walked through the door, a tightly wound fury that had probably been building for years. "So you're the other one," she said by way of greeting. "Iris," Patricia's voice held a warning. "What? It's true." She dropped onto the armchair across from me, arms crossed. "You're the legitimate daughter, the one he actually lived with, the one who got to call him Dad every day instead of just when he happened to show up." "Iris, please." "No, Mom. I'm tired of pretending this is okay. I'm tired of acting like we were a real family when we were just his side quest." I flinched, but I didn't argue because she wasn't wrong. "I know this isn't fair," I said carefully. "I know you got less of him than I did. But I didn't know. I didn't know any of this was happening. I thought he was working. You thought you had a normal dad with a normal job who loved you more than anything." Iris's voice cracked. "Meanwhile, I had a dad who showed up every few weeks like Santa Claus, who missed my graduation because he had to be at yours, who couldn't walk me down the aisle when I got married because he was traveling for work." "You're married?" "Divorced. 3 years. He never met my ex-husband." She laughed bitterly. "Probably for the best. Turns out I have terrible taste in men who can't commit." The room fell silent. Patricia was crying quietly. Daniel had his head in his hands. And I sat there, caught between families, belonging to neither. "I'm sorry," I said. It felt inadequate. It was inadequate. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry you grew up like that. I'm sorry he couldn't be what you needed. He couldn't be what any of us needed." Iris wiped her eyes angrily. "That's the thing. He spread himself so thin, trying to have everything, that nobody got enough of him. Not you, not me, not our moms, nobody." She was right. My father had been a ghost in two households, present but not present, there but not there. He'd given both families just enough to keep them hoping for more, and now he was gone, and all that was left was the wreckage. I stayed in Portland for 4 days. I learned everything, the full scope of my father's double life, laid out in conversations and photo albums and tearful confessions. He had been doing this for 30 years. 30 years of flights and lies and carefully maintained calendars. He had a system, Patricia showed me, a color-coded spreadsheet that tracked where he was supposed to be and when. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, all mapped out to ensure he never made a mistake. He'd never made a mistake. Until he died. On the flight home, I thought about my mother, about how I was going to tell her. I was going to tell her. She was already broken. The man she'd loved for 35 years was dead. Did she need to know that he'd also been a liar, a bigamist in everything but legal paperwork? A man who'd built a second life while pretending his first one was complete? Part of me wanted to protect her, to let her grieve the husband she thought she had instead of the stranger he actually was. But part of me knew she deserved the truth. Everyone deserved the truth. I landed at O'Hare at 11 p.m., took a cab to my apartment, sat on my bed, and stared at my phone for an hour. Then I called my mother. "Maya, it's late. Is everything okay?" "No," I said. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and it's going to hurt. But you need to know." I told her everything. The woman at the funeral, the box of photographs, Portland, Patricia, Daniel, and Iris. 30 years of lies. She didn't speak, not once. I talked for 20 minutes straight, and she didn't say a single word. When I finished, the silence stretched on so long, I thought she'd hung up. "Mom?" I knew. My heart stopped. "What?" I knew, Maya. Not the details, not their names or where they lived, but I knew there was someone else. Her voice was eerily calm. "I've known for almost 20 years. How?" "A wife knows. A wife always knows." I heard her take a shaky breath. "I found receipts once. Jewelry I'd never seen. Flights to cities he never mentioned. I confronted him, and he broke down. Told me there was someone else, someone he couldn't leave." "Why didn't you?" "Leave him? Because I was 45 years old with a daughter in high school and no career and no idea how to be alone." She laughed, a terrible, hollow sound. "Because I loved him. Because I thought if I was patient, if I was good enough, he'd eventually choose me." "Mom, he did choose me, in a way. He stayed. He came home. He never moved out or asked for a divorce. I told myself that meant something." I was crying now. Both of us were. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I brought this all up. I should have—" "No, you did the right thing." My mother's voice steadied. "I've spent 20 years pretending I didn't know, pretending everything was fine. That's not living, Maya. That's just surviving. What do we do now?" "I don't know," she paused. "But I think I'd like to meet them, Patricia and her children. I think I need to see the people he chose when he wasn't choosing us." I wasn't sure that was a good idea, but I understood the impulse. "Okay, Mom, I'll arrange it." 3 weeks later, we flew to Portland together. I'd warned everyone in advance, prepared them as best I could. But nothing could really prepare anyone for this. Two families, shaped by the same man, meeting for the first time after his death. We met at Patricia's house, neutralish territory. My mother walked through the door with her shoulders squared like she was heading into battle. Patricia was waiting in the living room. They stared at each other for a long moment. These two women who had shared a man for 3 decades without ever speaking. "Diane." Patricia said my mother's name carefully, like she was handling something fragile. "Patricia." More silence. Then my mother did something I didn't expect. She sat down on the couch, looked Patricia directly in the eyes and said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning. I want to know all of it." And Patricia did. She told the story I'd already heard, but this time with more detail, more honesty. The early years of guilt and justification, the way she'd convinced herself that what they were doing was okay because everyone was getting what they needed, the slow realization that nobody was getting enough. My mother listened without interrupting. Her face was unreadable. When Patricia finished, my mother asked one question. "Did he love you?" Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I believe he did." "Did he love me?" "He talked about you all the time, about how strong you were, how you held everything together, how he didn't deserve you." Patricia paused. "I think he loved both of us. I think that was his tragedy. He didn't know how to love one person completely, so he loved two people incompletely." My mother nodded slowly. "I hated you for 20 years," she said. "I didn't know your name or your face, but I hated you. You were the shadow in my marriage, the thing I could never compete with." "I understand. I don't hate you anymore." My mother's voice cracked. "Looking at you now, you're just a woman who loved a man who couldn't love anyone the right way, just like me." Patricia broke down. My mother held her, and I watched these two women, rivals, enemies, strangers, find something like forgiveness in each other's arms. After the meeting, Daniel gave me a box. "We found these when we were going through Dad's things," he said. "They're addressed to you and your mom. I think he meant to send them, but never did." I opened the box that night in my Portland hotel room. Letters, dozens of them, written over the span of years, dated but never mailed. "Dear Maya, you're 12 today. I'm writing this from a hotel in Portland, missing your birthday party because I told your mother I had a conference in Denver. I hate myself for this. I hate what I've become, but I don't know how to stop. I want you to know that I love you, that everything I do, the lies, the absences, all of it, isn't because you don't matter. It's because I made choices I can't unmake, and now I'm trapped between two lives I can't bear to lose. Maybe someday I'll be brave enough to tell you the truth, to let you hate me the way I deserve to be hated. But not today. Today, I'm a coward. Today, I'm just your father who missed another birthday. Happy 12th, Jenna Bean. I'm sorry. I read every letter. They spanned 15 years. Some were to me, some to my mother. All of them confessions he'd never had the courage to deliver. In one of the last ones, dated just 6 months before he died, he wrote, "I've decided to tell everyone, both families, the whole truth. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep dying in slow motion from the weight of my own lies. I'm going to do it next month, after Maya's birthday. I'll sit everyone down, Diane, Patricia, the kids, everyone, and I'll finally be honest. I know it will destroy everything. I know they might never forgive me, but at least they'll know who I really am. At least they'll have the truth. God help me. I'm so afraid." He died 3 weeks before my birthday. He'd been planning to tell us. He'd been gathering the courage for months, maybe years. And then his heart gave out before he could do it. I didn't know how to feel. Relief that he'd wanted to come clean? Anger that he'd waited so long? Grief for the conversation we'd never get to have? All of it. None of it. I called Daniel. "Did you read these?" "Some of them, the ones to us." He was going to tell everyone. He was planning to confess. "I know." Daniel's voice was quiet. "I've been thinking about that a lot, whether it would have been better or worse if we'd found out from him instead of like this. I don't know." Me neither. We sat in silence for a while, two half-siblings connected by phone, connected by grief, connected by a man who'd loved us both badly. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "Yeah." "Do you think you can forgive him?" I thought about my father, about the man I'd known and the man I'd discovered. About the letters he'd written and never sent, about the confession he'd planned and never made. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I think I'm going to try. It's been 12 months since I found that box in my father's closet. A year of grief and anger and confusion. A year of therapy and difficult conversations, and slowly, painfully, learning to live with the truth. My mother is doing better than I expected. She sold the house, couldn't stand living with all those memories, and moved to a condo downtown. She's started dating again, which feels strange, but also right. She deserves happiness. She deserves someone who chooses her completely. Patricia and I talk every few weeks. Not friends, exactly, but something close. Fellow survivors of the same shipwreck. She started volunteering at a hospice, helping families navigate grief. She says it helps her make sense of her own. Daniel and Iris have become family, real family. Not the half-siblings I discovered, but the brother and sister I chose to let in. We text constantly. We've taken 2 trips together, one to scatter some of my father's ashes in Portland, one just for fun, to prove we could be more than our shared trauma. My father's grave is in Chicago. His headstone says, "Beloved husband and father." We debated changing it, adding an asterisk, a footnote, something to acknowledge the complexity, but in the end, we left it simple. The people who visit know the truth. The people who don't need to. I still have the letters. I've read them so many times, the pages are starting to wear. Sometimes I hate them. Sometimes they're the only thing that makes me feel close to him. He was a liar, a coward, a man who wanted everything and ended up giving no one enough. But he was also my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who held me when I cried, who wrote me letters full of love and guilt and the desperate hope that someday I'd understand. I don't know if I understand. I don't know if I ever will. But I've stopped needing to. Some questions don't have answers. Some people can't be reduced to heroes or villains. My father was both and neither. A man who made terrible choices for complicated reasons, who hurt everyone he loved while loving them still. I can hold all of that now, the anger and the grief and the love and the forgiveness. They coexist inside me like his 2 families coexisted in his life, imperfectly, painfully, but somehow managing to survive. That's my story. A story about secrets and lies and the families we find after the ones we're given fall apart. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered something about a parent that changed how you saw them? A secret that rewrote your childhood? And if you have, were you able to forgive them? I'm still working on my answer, but I'd love to know yours. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your stories, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that none of us are alone in this. We're all just doing our best to make sense of the people who made us. My father lived 2 lives. He died with both of them incomplete. But in the end, his death did what his life never could. It brought us all together. 2 families, 1 grief, and slowly, impossibly, 1 forgiveness.